So this unconscious mind was seen as a big negative, and that the important idea of psychoanalysis was to take that which was unconscious and make it conscious. Huh. How about that? Sound familiar? Yes, that was Freud's original formulation, and he was attacked and vilified and thought to be so sick that he would suggest that there was this unconscious mind that had in it all kinds of dark secrets and things that the purity of man and woman couldn't know about. So talk about courage, talk about chutzpah, talk about the willingness to confront a society that would look upon you as a sick and depraved person. Freud, imperfect though he was as a human being, came up with this idea and tried very, very hard to communicate it both to the professional community and kind of let it into the other humans also. But he was met very much with the same things that almost all great discoverers meet with. Freud wasn't the first, nor the last. Hubbard ran into much of the same things. Einstein in physics was deemed to be a stupid, ridiculous person who was talking about fantasies that could not possibly exist, and that the idea that they were actually larger conceptually than Newton's world. So there was poor little Sigmund Freud, nice Jewish boy at a time when anti-Semitism was rampant in Europe. But he did become a medical doctor, which gave him a certain degree of protection. Not a lot, but some. But at least he was recognized, he's a doctor. But boy, the terrible things he's talking about, and the terrible things that might be found in the unconscious mind. Oh, and the things about society that he was trying to explain. A society that is erected, excuse the expression, on sexual inhibition and repression. So, it's just notable to me that preceding Hubbard in the field of the human mind and consciousness, Sigmund Freud, even though maybe you find some, if not a lot of his writings, or him personally disagreeable, he still got the momentum of the notion of there being a subconscious or an unconscious mind. He got it going, and ultimately led to a whole number of therapies and ideas, including Dianetics, which was hot on that. Now Hubbard later, by 1965, rejected Freud, who he had originally thought the world of. He said, he never had that much to contribute. But if Freud only contributed the courage to face up and confront a society that was destroying its own flower, that was repressing and inhibiting and suppressing people so that mass neurosis, hysteria, insanities of war, etc. were occurring. Freud got that going. And I want to give him Papa Freud a pat on the back for that. And I especially want to give Ron one because by the time he got around to tackling the society, he wasn't a doctor, so he couldn't really hang that shingle out and say, well, don't forget I'm a medical doctor, so that means the doctor's always right. No, he didn't have that. In fact, he took some pretty heavy shots at the medical definition of what a human being is. And he took a shot at the churches and the governments and the militarists and the educationists. He took some really heavy shots at them, and boy, they fought back. They fought back hard and heavy, and of course, Ron's history of, at first, now I can hold the day with them. And then finally now, I'm going to get into a games condition with them. Because Ron, case-wise and otherwise, was a red-haired and pugnacious and fighting kind of guy. Didn't like to take shit from anybody. Even though he had moments of pan-determinism and sweetness and enlightenment, he came from a naval family, and his idea was damn the torpedoes and full speed ahead. So he took to fighting these groups. And of course, one of the old ideas is what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And he understood that. So he kept fighting with these groups all over the world. And because they couldn't destroy him, it made him stronger in his organization. And he kept getting bigger and stronger and tougher and more dangerous and more able and willing to attack anything that popped up that looked like an enemy. Well, when you keep doing that for a while, that's what you get into. And that becomes more prevalent than your original mission statement, which was to bring to Earth and its people the idea of knowing how to know, the idea of knowing how to aid human suffering, the idea of making things free. Then you end up making something that does all the opposite of those things, because when you fight like this with other forces and neither one loses, you just keep building up this thing until that's what you become. And that is what happened to both Ron and his organization. It's quite understandable. And he eventually evolved an organization that could fight with countries, governments, anything. It was prepared to fight. Billions of dollars and lots of people that'll do anything and so forth. And that is what you end up in. If you lose your ability and willingness to have no opponents, you do not have to enter into a game. That's a matter of choice. He even declared somewhere along the way, I picked my opponents arbitrarily in order to play a game with them, because I like to fight. I'm not quoting Ron verbatim, but you'll find in the Philadelphia lecture series and other places where he said, I never really had any real opponents. I selected them arbitrarily. And that's a condition of self-determinism, because you know you don't have to enter a game unless you wish to. You have the choice to make a game, to become part of a game, to leave a game, to not make a game. And those are many of the freedoms that Scientology talked about and guaranteed. Because you don't have to play a game. You can if you want to, but you don't have to. And if you get into a long-term win-lose sport, either with a large group or a person, you will tend over time to take on the characteristics of your opponent. They will take on your characteristics, and you will build something to meet that game. The thing is, you don't want to build that and then stick what Dianetics and Scientology really are into that, because they aren't a game. They're what could be called an applied philosophy. Ideas and things that you can do with them, but they aren't a game in themselves. They're ideas about what you can do to free the human spirit and free the human being, but not because you have to. The mission isn't save the planet. That's a recipe for disaster. If you look at all the things that have arisen that are going to save Earth, don't save Earth. It doesn't need saving. I, Philip C. Spickler, am here to tell you the planet Earth does not need to be saved. And if you get on a goal like that, you will end up goaling, which means you will have immediately selected and created that which opposes your goal, because your goal says we don't have that, and we must fight and strive to make it possible. And of course, that which opposes that fighting and striving will appear, otherwise you wouldn't have anything to do. Like, oh, Earth is already clear. Not the planet, but the people. Well, then what am I supposed to do? Nothing. I need a world that's separated if I'm going to do something about it. I can't have people going around being what they are. I got to say, what you are is really not okay. I'm here to tell you, whoever I'm being, I'm here to tell you that people aren't okay the way they are. Here's a whole list of outpoints, and I'm not going to acknowledge all the plus things. Because if there are no outpoints, I have nothing to do. If everybody is physically okay and not sick, and when they are sick, they're okay about it, and when they die, they're okay about that too, what am I going to do if I'm a doctor? I have nothing to do. I wake up this morning, my nurse says, you got 100 calls this morning saying, we're perfectly healthy, we won't be needing your services anymore. What am I going to do? I have to do something. Well, maybe I could make people sick again. Don't tell anybody that I'm postulating people being sick so that I have some work to do. Don't tell people that I'm postulating crime so that I get to be a policeman. Don't say that I would die if I woke up this morning and found out there was no crime. Oh, God, that would be terrible. And no sickness. And what if I woke up and found nobody's aberrated, nobody's crazy, they don't need to be clear, and they don't need to, oh my God, what am I going to do? Well, let's see. Well, I don't know, maybe I'll become a ditch digger. But if you look at all the professions which are supposed to be solutions to problems, you often find that the solution becomes the problem. You cure one thing, but now you make, like, look, we have been so successful in curing the illnesses that kill people that we now have overpopulated the earth in such a way that we are destroying the land, the sea, and the air, polluting it. Because we found, well, yes, we can keep people from dying, but wait a minute, if you're going to do that, you have to practice control of the species so that it doesn't get out of control and so overpopulate and so pollute its nest and its environment that now the very thing that medicine is doing is the problem. So we're filled with problems and solutions. But anyway, like government gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Why? Because it's on the idea that people must be governed. If they weren't governed properly, things would be terrible. If we found out that people are self-governing, they don't need lawyers when they have difficulties, they sit down, work these things out. All of the professions that you see today that are considered so noble, so important to human existence and to everything, are all solutions to problems, and now have become the problem themselves because they have to postulate all the outpoints that they're there to fix. Just take a marriage, for example, and you'll find the same thing. The marriage starts as a solution. to two people different things: love, romance, sex, procreation, children. Starts out, it's beautiful. We're solving the problem of being a lone person who seeks a helpmate, someone that they can realize everything in another person, and then go ahead and make little copies of that called children. Well, I don't have to tell anybody that's done that solution then becomes problems. Not necessarily bad, but problems. Now the sex is gone, the romance is gone, the idealism is gone. Now it's work, raise the children, put up with everything, try not to do things outside the marriage agreement. Oh, I mean, it started out, it was so beautiful. Let's take an automobile. I came, unfortunately, from Detroit, Michigan. My body, this one, was born in Detroit, 1931. Detroit was known as Motown, which is short for Motor City, but the musicians called it Motown. Anyway, to make a long story short, going back in the history of automobiles, once upon a time, an automobile was made because 10 or 20 or 30 people called craftsmen got together and built each part of the automobile by hand. The wood, the metal, the internal combustion engine, the design, everything in it was contributed to and created by real craftsmen, not the sort of people that work on an assembly line going, you do that 8 hours a day, you're just putting a bolt in. And that's called making a car. But before that, there were people of vision who were skilled, who made one car at a time. Not, wow, we made 500 cars today. Wow! And we reduced all the people that are making them to. Isn't that neat? Mass production, assembly line. We don't need intelligence anymore. We don't need the sense of, I made that car. This beautiful thing. So that was the way cars were first built. But then along came some really terrible people who were idolized, like Henry Ford. Hey, I can make 1,000 cars a day and get everybody in the world possibly eventually driving a car. Won't that be wonderful? It'll solve all of their problems. They don't need living horses. They don't need a slower society that fits their bodies. They don't need living things. They need in cars that pollute and noise and take up all the spaces in cities and kill, in the United States of America, 50,000 people a day and a year, and seriously injure 250,000 people, so that their injuries are both life-threatening and will be with them the rest of their lives. And we live with that, and don't say that's dangerous. We say if 20 people are shot or killed, that's terrible. But in this country, the United States, where the automobile was developed to the point where it's... Anyway, you get the idea? The automobile was a solution. And that solution to faster and more comfortable travel has turned into the destruction of the air, the ozone layer. The automobile is a device, as I say, that in the hands of human beings in the United States kills annually 50,000 people. That's more people than we would suffer the army to do if they did that. We'd say that's terrible. And seriously injures in a way that the injury will be with people for the rest of their life. 250,000 people in this country are injured in automobile accidents every year. But it's like, hey, the automobile is wonderful. We gotta have it. We couldn't do anything about that. We try to reduce. So we want to reduce air pollution, and we want to reduce. And yet the automobile companies still come back to build bigger and more powerful cars so that crazy people can... I've got a car now with a 450 horsepower engine driving around Palo Alto with a speed limit of 25 miles an hour. I get 6 miles to the gallon. I don't give a shit if it's pollution. It's very noisy, or what it's doing to the world. So the automobile, oil, empowering the Middle East by buying all its oil and turning that into a nightmare. So I just illustrate these things not because they're serious, because they are. No, but to show you that the solution often becomes the problem, and then the new solution. And so a lot of what you're looking at in the current world is solutions to old problems. So one of the things you can do with Dianetics and Scientology is track the chains of problems and solutions regarding you personally, regarding the human race, regarding spiritual misadventures, and all these things, and come to a much better understanding for yourself and others of what's this all about, this idea of, well, if you stay on this course long enough, your level of understanding could exceed that which would be comfortable for a human being. But there are a few people that crave that degree of understanding. It's not for everybody, I say. But you can still have a lot of it, and as a human being, not be serious, and laugh a lot. And if you just get off on understanding, by get off I mean like, wow, I really understand how this all is working. Because with that understanding, you can choose what games to play. You can decide to be rich or poor. But the important thing is, you can realize that you are in life, in the world, but you are not of it, because you understand it. But you don't use so much understanding that you can't enjoy and play in the world. This is the big result, really, of all of Dianetics and Scientology, says Phil, is the understanding that you are in the world, in life, divorce, love, hate, death, sickness, success, failure. It's all wonderful. But at the same time that you're in it, you're not of it. You are something else. And what that something else is your own business if you're interested in finding out. But Scientology and Dianetics are not a crusade or a goal. They're a philosophy or a technique having to do with understanding and stuff like that. And should not be turned into something that is a solution to a problem. Because we have to start by looking at Earth and its people and acknowledging and approving and admiring that exact condition. You don't have to, but that's a nice thing to do, is to look at what's been created and exists, all of it, and say, wow, here's the big acknowledgement. Look at Phil. He's suggesting this. But don't make it a purpose. Just learn to acknowledge and learn to be invalidative and evaluative too. It's okay. It's all there. You can be admiring and acknowledging and being determined and all that. So I can say at this point, lest I break the camera, let's take a break.